Yes. So just to open things up, everybody, my name is Tiffany Wen. I am the content and partnerships manager at Soltara Healing Center and host of this really exciting conversation we're about to have. So just as sort of a reminder, here at Soltara, we are always striving to be this bridge between the global north and the south as we bring Shipibo-led, trauma-informed ayahuasca healing and the often overlooked aftercare of integration to non-Indigenous seekers and just curious people from all around the world. We're here to spotlight other valid ways of knowing, healing, and building up our mind-body connection so that we can integrate those oftentimes profound learnings, both in our lives and to the lives of others in our community back at home. And so with that, I am just so excited to be hosting our guest today, Skippy Mesirow, who is the co-founder of this organization called Elected Leaders Collective and has just an incredible story, which I'm going to briefly condense here, and then we're going to get into all of it in the conversation. So Skippy is a public servant to his core. He is an Aspen City Council person and a founder of this organization, Elected Leaders Collective, which is essentially a company bringing tools and community of mental health and well-being to mission-driven public sector workers. His life mission is to heal our politics. So in 2007, Skippy rose from an unpaid intern to a deputy director of his home state and a 5-state region for Obama for America in 2008. At just the young age of 23, he ran a statewide race as a campaign manager for Jesse White in 2010. And he went on this whole healing journey, which we're going to talk about, but eventually co-founded and chaired Aspen's Next Generation Advisory Commission to give youth a true voice. He organized a successful ballot initiative to change Aspen's election day, which resulted in the highest ever voter turnout by over 26%. He ran for city council, yes, snaps, where he currently serves as a change agent, inspiring innovative policy in affordable housing, mental health, voter participation, and the environment. Now he focuses on a revolutionary development neutral model for affordable housing, a first in the nation therapeutic model for psychedelic healing, reimagining Aspen's downtown core to a pedestrian area complete with a local business district, and reinventing how our government works. Dang. Integrating and owning his political, personal mental health journey, he founded this organization, Elected Leaders Collective, to heal our politics from the inside out. That is not really a phrase you hear often, heal our politics. The ELC works with elected officials and civil servants across the country to help reduce stress, anxiety, depression, overwhelm, and reactivity, and increase performance, improve communication, and help heart-centered leaders connect with each other in a circle of trust. So if you serve others, ELC is here to serve you. Skippy also lives with his partner, Jamie, in Aspen, and they travel as much as possible with backpacks and a motorcycle to unconventional places. Skippy is an ultramarathoner, a burner, a skier, a biker, a driver, and a cook with the word citizen tattooed on his right arm. Oh my gosh.
The Zoom filter's not having it.
Yeah, Zoom's warming up. So my gosh, Skippy, it is such an honor to have you with us today, setting the bar high and just being a leader in just every aspect of life.
Thank you. Thank you. It's awesome to be here. And I want your edit of my bio because that's the hardest thing to do. And I think you nailed it. I was like, this sounds pretty good.
It's, maybe you just need different voices to hear it. And I strategically left parts out that we're definitely going to be like revealing throughout this conversation because, and this is actually a great place to start. I think your background speaks to a lot of different people, but what I think is most striking and what's so unique about your story is kind of bringing together these two, honestly, seemingly disparate fields together, politics and healing. I know that Marianne Williamson was an example of that when she ran for president, but it's very, very rare to see public figures own their healing story and use that as political power, not just wellness, but like, this is actually my power and this is how I want to stand in everything that I do. And I love to start these conversations with personal stories. And I know that you have been a retreat guest at Soltara, if I'm not mistaken, twice. And, you, I think, are able to just expand so much because of all of these experiences. So I'd love to start kind of there at that point in time. So, ayahuasca in your life, what called you to do this work for yourself? And what was your intention kind of going into this work?
Let me do a gut check on the length of story you want. Do we want the like 1 second set? Like the 1 is like the soundbite, and the 10 is like we're gonna hang out for 2 hours, and I'm gonna share all the background thinking. And where do you want me on this one?
Maybe if we can find a middle point. I do feel
Okay.
like the longer version will have its place in time,
Okay.
because I would love to hear that, but maybe the medium-sized version.
We're gonna go with a 5. Okay. Cool.
Okay, 5.
I had really been on my spiritual journey. The fact that I call it that means it's working, because I would never have used that language at the beginning of this journey. I was still in my various like child rebellion against all forms of religion, higher power, etc. But that was about 6 years ago, and that journey has been long. It has been meandering. It has been nonlinear, and it has necessarily included a variety of different modalities and methodologies. I had curiosity about ayahuasca going back over a decade prior to participating with the medicine, but never felt good. And I will say I am like a control freak, right? So like my hands up there, that's part of my patterning and the result of my trauma. And so it's always really scared me, or at least it really used to scare me in a significant way. And what I was working on at that point in my journey was really around my issues of anxiety, which had been regular, chronic, and acute. And I sat down with a good friend of mine. I had no idea he had been to Soltara or done anything. We just got back to town and said, "Hey, do you want to have dinner?" And we got food, and he had told me that he had gone to Soltara. And I asked him to share about his experience because I was curious about it. But what stood out to me is when he was describing the insights he gained and the memories that came back for him from his childhood. And we've been friends for a long time. We've traveled around the world together. I was like, oh, wow. Like, A, I didn't know this. I guess he didn't either before that. And B, I could copy and paste what I know from my childhood on this. And maybe this is something that I should consider. And so I looked up Soltara because it's where he had gone. I did a bunch more background research on the medicine and the container and the rest of it. I had a call, which I found out recently was actually with Melissa, of all people. She took the call, which poor Melissa got like 2 hours of my questioning. And I finally decided to take the plunge. And my intention was to understand the root of my anxiety. And I had the sort of background microwave, radiation going. And this is probably in your childhood trauma, but I didn't really know what that meant at that point. So that was sort of the intention I stepped into the first ceremony with.
So the natural next question, and I, thank you for giving me the version 5, because I know I heard you on the We the Young People podcast, and like you had like your version on that show. It's hard to ask how was your experience, because every ceremony is so different and just packed with different levels of insight. But if you had to sort of summarize what, you've been there twice, what your sort of key takeaways were, could you give us the 5 version of that?
Yeah. I think what I got from my first ceremonies was not an answer, but it was a portal and a toolkit. It was a portal in that I started to move past the place of abject fear, because to truly receive from the medicine, my experience is we need to be in surrender and curiosity. And that was very hard for my ego mind to do. I got some initial insights that in later ceremonies or just in normal default world proved to continue to be embodied. Things around, the ownership of patterns, and whether those were mine or, say, coded from my mother or others. The fear of death came in, and being able to experience my own death and making peace with that, and recognizing the beauty in each stage of life as beautiful into and on itself, not something to be feared. So there were these seeds that were laid, and I could go into each one in great detail, and they felt magnificently transformative at the time. But retrospectively, what I recognize is the toolkit that I actually got was the container around the ceremonies. So it was the month of dieta, it was the journaling practice, it was the regular meditation. It were these things that I put in place really to quell the fear I had for the process, that truly were the secret sauce. Because so much of what I had unconsciously been doing was sort of self-medicating my trauma with various activities of emotive suppression, right? And looking back, that started with high caffeine use from a very young age, right? And then when I got older, alcohol became part of the mix, and then drug use, right? And I had been working through those things and removing them. Ironically, when I really removed them, that's when anxiety popped up, because now the suppression wasn't there. And so the emotion came up. And I now know that was my brain telling me, here's where to look. I didn't understand that at that time. But in creating that container, I created the space for my emotional self to begin, and my reflective mind to begin to process. And so it was actually after those ceremonies, back in the real world, during COVID, in that sort of pressure cooker of hyper work hours for me as an elected and in my regular job, tiny little studio, Aspen, Colorado, and really committing to the deep personal work, that those tools provided the opportunity for me, well outside of the container of ceremony, to answer that initial question of where my anxiety came from, right? Which I now fully understand. And so it really provided, like I said, that portal of safety and the toolkit for me to resolve that significantly after ceremony.
Wow. So eloquently put. And I love the emphasis you put on the container, the preparation, of course, the experience, but then what you do with that after. And, this is something you hear in all different shapes and sizes, that it's not just like the brew itself, right? Because in the Western world with Western medicine, it's like, okay, take this pill, let's study the effects of this pill, right? But like, what about, the people that hold that space? What about the tools that allow you to slowly loosen and open into that place of safety within yourself, where you can receive what there is to receive, and be open to an indigenous perspective around healing, which is oftentimes not something we can cognitively understand, but it's something we can understand to an extent, and then trust wholeheartedly with that integration of, global north, global south, east, west, Western mentality, and just indigenous ways of listening and connecting to spirit. So, you talked a little bit about, so well summarized, bringing this back home, into your world, into Aspen, into politics. Would you say that was really challenging for you? Because oftentimes integration can be the hardest part, because a lot of people don't understand what that experience actually entails.
Yeah, it was certainly challenging. I think the safe thing to do would be sort of to cloister yourself in your experience, not share it with anyone who could be threatening or judgmental, and think that you could integrate privately, which of course is a complete fallacy. How can you integrate two things that don't touch? You can't. You can't do it. And so I felt and I feel a high sense of responsibility to live this journey openly so that integration can actually happen, and to leverage my position to make this type of healing safe for other people. And that's a cognitive state, right? So that's a mental awareness. It's different than the emotional. When I was prepping for this interview with you, I went back and pulled like all of my social media posts so I could see, what did I actually say, right? And before I was going in, the post was, I'm going to a wellness retreat, right? And of course that's true. But I'm like, going to a wellness retreat? Like, don't ask me what it is, right? I mean, that energy was there. And I came out and I did share right away. I think you can see the baby steps in the post, that it's a plant medicine retreat. And then, by my second time coming out, it's a play-by-play of, what do you do in the Maloka, right? And so there is a incremental progression of me getting out of my own way, even when I knew I had to do it. And the first thing I shared, like, broadly, was actually a podcast episode that I sent you. It's called the Gondola Cast. Our buddy Andrew Wicks does these little gondola chats about things Aspen. And I went back and listened to it this morning, actually, because I was curious, and I was actually really impressed with myself. I was really open, but I also recognized that I was open because Andrew is a peer. He is my age. We're on a gondola. When, like you said, when we integrate the whole experience, I was in a comfortable place. It's very different than having the city manager or a hostile citizen asking me questions at a public meeting, for instance, right? That environment is one that inhibits rather than cultivates open sharing. And so I think, being mindful of that. But yeah, my commitment's been to push through regardless.
Yeah, wow. It's different contexts, I think, right, breed different levels of safety where you can choose and be discerning about how much you want to share. And that is something Soltara definitely helps us to understand better before we leave retreat, that you don't have to necessarily share it with everyone. And it's better to be selective because it's such a deep and personal experience. And it's a practice of the energetics in the body, which is not typically something that Westerners really have vocabulary for. So I would love to shift now into ELC, Elected Leaders Collective Land, and just, I went on the website, and I think it's no surprise to me or the everyday person that the political world in general can definitely breed a toxic environment and affects the very people that are here to take care of everyone else. So the ones that are the helpers are the ones that typically suffer the most. I saw some of the stats. I'll read them out to listeners here who might not know that, like, over 90% of elected leaders, face mental health challenges. A large percentage, I think 83%, experienced anxiety and or depression, sense of overwhelm, isolation, disconnection from community. And that's not really a surprise, but it's really staggering to really internalize and to think that, how can our elected officials and public servants and people who go into this work actually do their best work and live up to their highest potential when they're not being cared for? And so I would love to hear from you, having had these powerful experiences with the plant teachers, what did you see was really missing within the world of politics in Aspen where you sit, and how did that then become a springboard for Elected Leaders Collective?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's so many ways to go with that. I would say, I sort of have a theory of political change. When I say political change, I don't mean like, let's make a 5% improvement on the environment, however that would be. But I think if we don't significantly reform our democracy, we're going to lose it, and we're going to lose it soon. It is that dire. I view the loss of our democracy as a more existential threat than climate change, not because it's more, but because it's sooner. I mean, it really is to that degree. And I don't think that this is something that has fully computed with the public. It's starting to, but those of us who have felt this way for over a decade, and it felt like not much has changed. Maybe it's gotten worse. And so I found myself during COVID working, 100 hours a week from a 320 square foot studio, doing my public service work, which was extremely challenging, as you can imagine, during that time with all the stress and external, pressures coming in on you, but also running a vacation rental company, which at that time was like, will there be vacation rentals again? Who knows? And just feeling like if I'm going to be dedicating my time, I want it to be to my true passion and North Star. And where can I best be of service? And so these 4 pillars of universal change, which I now see sequentially as like, healing the self, right? So from the inside, connecting the worlds of politics and wellness is how I used to frame that, right? Then coming together across ideologies, right? So starting to see and work with each other as people, as you do in a functioning democratic system. Ultimately, process and systems reform, changing the way our democracy functions at a base level so it actually delivers on what we need. And then lastly, universal participation, because representative democracy works, but it only represents those that play in the game, right? And so if we all want to be represented, we all need to take part in it. And when I looked at those 4 things, I thought, wow, man, those last 3, I know people way smarter than me that have been working on these problems for years. I don't know anybody anywhere working on politics and wellness. And so I just made a commitment to start figuring out what that meant. I really didn't have any more to it than that. And in the process, I began to talk to hundreds of elected leaders across the country. And all of a sudden I was like, holy, can I swear on here? Like, I was like, holy shit, right? I mean, so many of these things that had happened in my life in service that I thought were just me in a bubble universe are happening everywhere. Battles with anxiety, with stress, with overwhelm. I mean, we forget out of the 518,000 roughly elected leaders in this country, 500,000 are at a local level. We're getting paid less than minimum wage to be on call all the time. So we're all working 2 or 3 jobs. And we don't get off when we get off. When we go to the grocery store, people are at best asking us questions. At worst, you're getting yelled at in the checkout line, right? I mean, people are experiencing for the crime of volunteering their time for a school board or to watch an election are getting death threats to their kids. That's the environment we're in, right? I mean, imagine having true or completely fictitious lies about you on social media every day, and not by strangers, by people in your community, right? I mean, if you're a cashier at Lululemon and people were screaming at you across the counter, how do you think you would do your job? Do you think you'd do it well? I don't. Right?
Wow.
And so it just became so abundantly clear that this work was needed. And I feel in many ways like sort of the guinea pig, like the product tester, right? I've been working myself in some way since 4th grade, right? I mean, it was in 4th grade. So you're like, what does that mean?
Well, yeah, right. Tell us the story of 4th grade.
Third, I've always been an athlete, and I've reciprocally struggled with weight because I love food and it's so great. Like I said, it was sort of my first coping mechanism, and I had no idea that was what's going on. But 3rd grade, captain of my football team, we win the championship. I'm running the offense and the defense as running back and middle linebacker. 4th grade comes around, I'm like, great, let's go for the season. And they're like, sorry, you're going to play offensive guard. Which, if you don't know what that means, it means you get to like be on the line. It's sort of like being put in left field in baseball. Why? Because I was too fat to play. I was over the weight limit for a skilled position.
Wow.
And that was like, okay. So I made my mom take me to Weight Watchers, and she did. So that was like, in some ways, the start of my journey. But man, I like do everything wrong first is sort of my unintentional motto. And so, I've just been really lucky to have the challenges I have. They've been my biggest teacher, and I've been extremely privileged to be in the place that I am. Sorry, I'm getting a call coming through. We're still on Zoom. This is how it works.
Life is happening. Life is still happening.
Sorry. I have been privileged to be in a place with access to some of the greatest healers in the world, whether that's in productivity, or mindfulness. I've served on boards of wellness and mental health organizations. I live in a community whose like entire culture is based on mind, body, spirit, the Aspen idea. And so I've just been very lucky to try a lot of these things and work on myself. And I thought, well, if I can, translate my experience and open the scope of opportunity to others, first elected officials, but now, as I'm sure we'll talk about, the broader public sector. That's just like, I feel honored to use my time for that.
And I couldn't help but think you can only help people as far as you've helped yourself, right? Being a leader,
Maybe.
I think maybe. Okay, yeah. I really, I guess, appreciate just the fact that you are doing the work on yourself to be able to help others, right? It's not like you're just trying to help other people without really doing the work yourself. I think those two things intuitively go parallel pathing, right? And I would love to just land ELC a little bit more, because I think it's very, rare for people to get this inside peek under the hood of an elected official's daily life, day in and day out. And, you painted that picture of like working the register at Lululemon, and you have, violence, honestly, like coming at you, and you're just trying to do your job, but you can't please everyone. And that's sort of the game you've signed up for. So can you take us a little bit deeper into like, what is an experience at ELC like? I know you guys, hold group coaching, workshops, retreats. I imagine you brought a lot of this safe space container work into this realm to make people feel like they can trust in Circle. And I don't know if you could just take us a little bit under the hood, and maybe even not using names, but share like an example or something you've witnessed, like of an elected official going through that process for the first time and how that impacted them.
For sure. And we certainly won't share names. Confidentiality is extremely important to what we do. Some of our electeds do share their stories, right? So, but that's their choice, not ours. And that safety and container is required to do the work, like we said. So let's talk about our signature cohort program. It's called the Pride, as in a pride of lions. The idea is the current political energy is sort of that tiger energy of being on your own, solo, hunting, dominating, winning, which is, of course, it's an illusion. What really happens is, to get anything done, you're on the team, and diversity on that team is important. Just like a basketball team needs a tall guy to play center and a short guy, short in basketball, to run around really fast and shoot from the perimeter. The same is true in politics, but we have this vision of being, the savior or whatever, that everyone should be like us and there should be only one party and only one view. And it's total bullshit. Like, that is a recipe for failure. So anyways, that's just grounding of what we do. The Pride is a small group cohort of 8 to 12 elected leaders. Now we're actually launching our first for staffers, administrators, nonprofit workers. Super exciting. We just got our first signups, but to date, all electeds. And we carefully curate the group to get people outside of their geographic fishbowl, so that you're not with people who recognize you, who paint onto you assumptions, etc. And we cultivate a safe environment. We don't allow for any policy, any party, any partisanship in the space. It's entirely about the internal, the transformational, the relational. And we help the group understand how to share and interact in the way that creates a flat plane. So none of those unconscious biases are cued. We're meeting as humans who have a shared experience as peers in our role. We do three basic things. We have a professional transformational coach in that setting. So we do tools in there. We train tools of emotional and personal mastery, of conflict resolution, of stress reduction, of mindfulness. They change. Then we have coaching that happens in that container. And then we have what we call peer counsel of support. And so we give people a framework, non-advice, non-solicitation, right, to show up with experience and with permission to share. And within that container, we learn a lot. We make real trusted connection. And eventually, those restrictions around, oh, I didn't share this. So we only are first name and state for the first 6 months, right? So you don't have those unconscious cues. Eventually, once we have trust, those can get removed, and then prides begin to meet. And so now you're meeting someone not from a place of skepticism or need or desire for change or changing them, but just from trust, from shared experience, right? And it's from that that we can really begin to work together. So, I mean, I'll just give a brief example from our previous session. We had a elected individual who had been receiving regular angry to threatening emails. And we provided a framework to engage with that person. They freely chose to do so, to invite them into a face-to-face dialogue, to practice reflective listening, to demonstrate with clarity that they understood where they were coming from, and then with permission to ask to share on their end. And, by the end of that, they were hugging. Like, that is such a huge win. It may seem small, but that's the stuff that ripples, right? And not only was the dynamic shifted and trust built, but for that elected, whatever that program running RAM in the back of their brain saying, you are under threat, you are being criticized, you are not okay, whatever's triggering, whatever deeper stuff they have, at least for this person, is gone. And imagine how much better they're able to do their job and show up for that. I mean, I could give you innumerable examples like that. I mean, another one we just had of awareness of childhood trauma, where this person who holds a very high position for the first time recognized that between birth and when they left the house, their family had never said anything to them other than, you're stupid. And they had been carrying around that story through their leadership. And when that came up, the ego's defense showed up, right? And so then they're reactionary. And since this insight came up, now from their retelling, like, they're showing up completely differently, not just in the boardroom. I'll say boardroom, so it's agnostic and we're not getting where it is, but in their place of service, but also at home with their wife. Like, after 20 something years of marriage, they said it's the best it's ever been, and like, wow. Imagine how much better you'd show up for your job if your home life is good, right? So these things are all integrated. So I don't know if that's specific enough, and we can talk about, other types of programs, but I think that's a good example.
Yeah, it's so holistic. And the whole time you were sharing these breakthroughs, I just thought, how did that not exist before? I mean, thank goodness you saw the opportunity and owned it fully and brought it to life. But it just seems so intuitive. Like, of course that exists, but it didn't, I guess, exist in the way that you're describing until you launched this not too long ago, right? I mean, ELC is a relatively new organization.
Very, very recently. And I think anyone who has delved into the psychedelic experience will understand to some degree the illusion of separation. And like you said, we have done an incredible job that we should be grateful for, of delving very deeply into each detail of life, biology, and the world. And it's been the research at a very tactical level from the 2 and 3 generations that came before us that have provided the body of knowledge and understanding necessary. But now our job is that reintegration, right? And so I think it's just an idea that's of its time. I would push back against the notion, or I'm a little uncomfortable with the notion that it's me or my experience. Like, I feel as though I am a substrate for the universe to act through me. I didn't choose where I was born. I didn't choose how my parents acted. I didn't choose to have access to the healers I've had who have taught me what I've learned. I didn't invent any of this. And so I am a vector for things that are millennia older than me to hopefully find a new audience.
It's like a bridge person, which I think, I don't know, when you're able to sort of speak the language of many, you have a greater chance of uniting worlds that would never really converse or be curious. You said curiosity is a really important tool. And I think if you have curiosity, you're more likely to listen, which is how you sort of receive those insights in ceremony, but then well beyond that.
Well, what I can say for me personally is curiosity has always been my most driving personality trait. So it is intrinsic to me. I mean, there's this great photo that we all love. I'm like 2 years old and I just won my first ski race and I get picked up by the giant bunny costume to like give me the medal. And instead of the medal, I'm like looking in the eye to try to figure out what's going on. So I think that's intrinsic to me, but I will tell you that my curiosity has been able to be activated only so far as my insecurity has been diffused. Because as soon as I become fearful of what you're going to think or how people will perceive me or the internal story of I'm not good enough, then the ego comes to the rescue and is like, I will tell you what I know, even if it's total bullshit, just to protect safety. Right. And so a big part of my healing journey, my spiritual journey, that has been greatly influenced, but certainly not entirely the outcome of plant medicine journey in that container, has been to continually find myself so that I can show up and use that curiosity more and more of the time.
Mm, that's beautiful, Skippy. And, you know, we sort of talked a little bit about like helping the helpers, but, being able to also obviously help the public. That's why you're, here to sort of serve and bring that integrated healing into the causes you champion. And, one in particular, I'd love for us to spend some time talking about, which is this therapeutic model for psychedelic healing in Aspen. And, for those who haven't listened to Skippy's podcast on We the Young People, that was a really powerful episode. I listened to it. I think it was one of the first times really shared so openly. And Aspen, have I been to Aspen? I think I may have been there to ski once. I know it's a resort town. You love Aspen. I've never heard someone just feel so alive and advocate for Aspen's gems as much as you. But then I was also really surprised to hear, the other side, which, you mentioned that, Aspen struggles immensely with mental health 2 to 3 times the national average rate of anxiety and depression, 4 times the suicide rate. That really blew my mind. I would never know that. I don't really understand that, but I can only imagine that being in that world informed why also creating a different kind of model for healing was so important. And I'd love to learn a little bit more about that and how this project is shaping up in the public sector and the political sector in this sort of heightened moments of stress, overwhelm, burnout. Yeah, on and
Yeah.
on.
Well, first, just to level set what you said, and you asked kind of, I don't understand why that would be. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV, but I certainly have an opinion that's grounded in experience, which is, there are certain mental health conditions where you truly need to see a doctor and be medicated, and they are biologically based and the rest of it. But the majority of what we experience as mental health challenges, depression, anxiety, are relational conditions, right? They are different presentations of the core condition of disconnection amongst an insatiably social species, right? And so in a place like Aspen, and you can track this around the world, right? The higher the wealth, the higher the happiness, the higher the unhappiness. Why? Because the relative difference is so great. So in a place where everyone is go, 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 do, 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 where everyone is climbing a 14er in the morning, having a great lunch, working all evening, partying up, whatever it is, like we are a very go society and it's beautiful and amazing. But if you're not there, if you don't get that stuff, if you don't fit in, if you're feeling down, if you're the only one that is in your walls, the isolation effect is extra hard. And these places that are highly sought after are also necessarily very expensive. And it is not an uncommon thing for someone to arrive as a young person, have an incredible, fun 20s and 30s, piece together their housing through the affordable housing program, whatever it is to sort of make it work, but really sacrifice everything for the lifestyle and turn around in their later years when they're physically perhaps not as capable of enjoying or doing those things, where they don't have an appreciated asset because they've been in affordable housing to fund their retirement, where the cost of living around them has increased, and to feel as though that community that they loved and gave their life to has left them behind in some way, right? And I think, this is just something I've observed, right? So I think that's where it comes from. And then for the kids, thank God, the amount of not even like teen, like kids suicide and suicide attempt that we have is staggering. Like one is way too much. But, if you go to a school where half to 3/4 of the kids are in affordable housing, their parents are ski instructors or servers, and the other quarter are billionaires' children, it's a strange dynamic, right? The othering is not just on social media. Not to say that there's othering amongst the children, but the feeling of being separate or less than for some can be quite real, right? So I think that's where it comes from. And in my experience, and the experience I've heard shared by innumerable other people, I'm sure you will agree with this, the therapeutic opportunity for psychedelics in the right container. And I stress that so much because I still think like 90% of communication is nonverbal, 90% of the healing experience is non-medicine, right? 10% is the medicine. And so what these compounds uniquely provide is not a treatment to an underlying biological response to a core condition, but rather the opportunity to go back into your mind and renegotiate the stories and patterns that you have had at the root, allowing that to transmute itself into something else. That is a remarkable thing that maybe happens through therapy, but it takes a very long time and not for everyone. And it doesn't happen for everyone in plant medicine, but it does, in my experience, dramatically speed the opportunity and openness to that in a way that I think has the power to heal so many of these mental health challenges that we have here sooner than later. And sooner than later is good because sooner means less chance for suicide. It means less chance for suffering. It means less chance for contagion because these emotions and actions are contagious on the bad side as well. When someone kills themselves, it's more likely other people will as well. So I see that tremendously valuable. And we approach this work within a container with a recognition that we have a huge problem with substance abuse and party culture here. And so it was really important for our group to create a model that was focused on healing and therapeutic use, that intentionally set forth educational parameters, community outreach, that safe container so people understand how to best utilize these compounds in the most effective way and in such a way that does not further inflame or even make worse some of these really problematic behaviors around, partying, etc. And, you can use the same tool for good or bad. And I'm not saying that there's necessarily a bad, but, you can take your car to drive your sick wife to a hospital, and you can take your car to run over somebody in Charlotte, right? This is just the reality. And so I think we need to be really careful about this stuff.
Oh, I love the way that you described renegotiating the patterns and stories that don't serve you. That was just, if I could just put that up on a billboard right now, I feel like that could really help people understand the depths of how these medicines can work. And as you were talking to, I realized in Aspen, like legally, are psychedelics legalized or decriminalized? Can you just sort of give us like the 101 about where we're at?
Technically, no.
Okay.
Technically, we have not passed any legislation that would decriminalize or deprioritize the use of psychedelics in any way. We have a piece of legislation in which our group is still gathering signatures for that. We also have an effort, not we, but there is an effort in Colorado, Proposition 122 on the ballot in November, to do so statewide. And very candidly, I think that has put a little bit of pause on our effort, because I think people have thought, oh, well, they're going to do it, we'll just wait and see. So a little bit of that initial fervor kind of settled in terms of, people being out on the street corner getting signatures. And hopefully that passes. But if it doesn't, we're very close to putting it on the ballot. So it'll move forward. That said, Aspen has a history of policing that goes back to the 70s, which effectively did this. I mean, when we talked to the heads in our law enforcement divisions, they said, I mean, we don't have the thing, we don't celebrate it, we don't talk about it, but we already do this. We don't ever arrest anybody for having mushrooms, for instance. This is part of the legacy of really Hunter S. Thompson and the Freak Power movement, and a lot of really cool history if you ever have a chance to dig into it.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, all I know is that Denver was the first city to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms, and like in general, Colorado is a leader, I think, in the psychedelic space. So I'm really excited to see where this goes, and my fingers and toes are crossed that the legislation passes in November. So that
I'd love to give a shout out to Kevin Matthews, good buddy. He was the person who first brought the idea of psychedelic decriminalization to Denver. First person anywhere in the country, bootstrapped the campaign, having no idea really what he was doing. He'd tell you the same thing against all the odds, and passed it. Shocked everybody. And it was the first in the nation. And he is now part of the team that is running Prop 122. They were here for an event and fundraiser 2 days ago. I was just with them. Beautiful, heart-centered human, and someone you should probably have on this one day.
Absolutely. Kevin Matthews.
Happy to make a connection. He's
amazing.
And he'll wear more interesting shirts than me.
Well, you do have the citizens tattoo, so it makes it evens out. Gosh, I'm like so curious about Aspen and just this culture that you described that, is so primed, I think. And I just want to follow up on, the decrim efforts and how it passed unanimously. Do you have any sort of, idea around why it was, the opportunity just took off and people were primed and open to accept it without pushback?
In Denver?
Yeah.
Well, it didn't pass unanimously. It passed by a margin of 1%.
Wow.
So it's very, very close. But no one thought that it had, a 30% chance in hell to pass. So it was surprising to everyone, but it was a very close race.
Got it. And I know you represent Aspen, but like since that was passed in Denver, it was pretty recent, right? 2019, but have there been, I don't know, any observations as to how that's impacted mental health or, other desired outcomes of having such a powerful medicine essentially at the disposal of people's mental health and well-being?
So part of that legislation required a board, oversight board, to be put together. That took time to do, but it is together. And a couple months ago, I couldn't tell you the exact date, they published their first report, which was also required on what was going on. Now, I will say Denver was just, as far as I understand it, a decrim effort. It didn't have that sort of container and therapeutic piece to it. So, some people may be choosing to use it for that. Others may not.
Right.
That said, that report is where you'd find that information.
Okay, cool. We'll do like a little follow-up on that. Gosh, there's so many things we didn't touch on, but I guess, I want to come back to sort of, I guess ELC and, this great initiative to sort of heal our politics from the inside out and helping the helpers essentially get the support that is so often sorely lacking in the political world. I guess like what's next? What's on the horizon? Where would you like to see ELC go in a year from now, 5 years from now? What's the big vision?
Yeah. Well, right now, we just finished our first conference. We did like a 9-minute main stage, just normalizing that these experiences are that. They're normal. If you have one, congratulations, you're human. And that's precisely what we need. That we are in a naturally chaotic environment in politics, and that's not a bad thing, right? It's like being in the middle of the ocean. There's nothing wrong with the ocean. The issue is that no one ever taught us to swim, and we don't have any things, and so we don't have the tools to respond and turn that challenge into what we want, right? And we then invited people. This was about a 400-person auditorium. Maybe there's 200 people there, elected officials, city managers, county managers, nonprofit leaders, campaign workers, to what we called a safe space and transformation station. And it was a 30-minute little session where we asked people to just fill out what was going on for them, 30-second self-diagnostic, what's going on internally, stress, anxiety, overwhelm, externally, conflict with colleagues, issues in the press, etc. And we took them from symptom to root cause and just gave them some tools to go practice at home. And it was amazing because we booked the event completely solid. We booked sessions after the event, and we got approached by city managers, by mayors, by county commissioners, by department heads in major cities. And so what we learned is that our world is ready for this. And that's really the beginning, right? We have to be open to change and transformation. So we learned that. And from that, we are now beginning delivery of some new offerings, right? So we are doing new elected official onboarding training. We're doing that both with existing members. So, your entire city council or your entire board of county commissioners will come together for a either 2 or 3 day or half day offsite where we level set, all based on mental health of what is this job really? What are you getting into versus what you think you're getting into? What does it mean? And how do we recognize that meta skill of diversity as a strength? How do we recognize and understand experiences of mental health challenges and use those as the flashlight to look on our own internal journey? How do we then do that when we're in conflict? What are our internal tools of transformation? And when those aren't sufficient, what are our external tools? We like jokingly say carefrontation, right? Like, how do we turn conflict into creation in a shared framework that we can accept so that friction becomes an opportunity for creation? And then we lead people through sort of how do we plug that into our service, right? What's our North Star? What are our intentions? How do we integrate that work? How do we hold ourselves accountable to be the best team delivering the best results for our community as possible? And so we're doing those for like individual groups, and then we're doing distributed ones. So, we may do one for all of Colorado where 1 or 2 people can sort of opt in. And then they have the option of ongoing support through the Pride program. So those are some of the new things that we're doing. We're also going to be doing quarterly retreats for some major, city departments of, tens of people. And so that's sort of what's emerging right now. We just want to grow this organically and be of service as is needed. So whether you want to take part in a Pride or whether you have others who you think would benefit from that, we can. And of course, we go all the way up to one-to-one coaching, right? It's a much more expensive endeavor, but it is the ultimate container of transformation. And we do offer coaching that is specifically designed around transformation and healing from those who understand and are within the political space and within the public sector and those unique challenges. So that's the now. There is a long-term vision, but I think we're best to focus on what's in front of us and just focus on being of service.
Whew. Wow. I am really blown away by what is emerging and how you've been able to tap into this, by way of your personal healing journey and how you're able to now touch the lives of so many others who I think, this is needed more than ever. It's the medicine is here. We just need to choose to tap into it and have that container of community, which I think is a really important ingredient to transformation. Like you said, it's not in isolation, but it's together with other people, especially those who understand the unique challenges of being an elected official, being a civil servant, having such high stakes in the job. So I guess, as we wrap up this conversation, Skippy, are there any final words And then, of course, please
Mm.
tell us how, for those who, are in the political world or who just have been disillusioned with politics and how the world is shaping up. Yeah. How can
Yeah.
they find you, and what are your final words for us today?
The first final word. You're talking to someone in elected office when there's more than one final word. The first word is just gratitude, right? I am truly and eternally indebted to Soltara and the Soltara family. This project wouldn't have happened without all of you. And it continues to be empowered by you, like literally right now. So thank you. Thanks to thanks to our plant healers, to Uni, for providing the opportunity to do, frankly, what we already know. And to everyone else, thank you to those people in public service, paid or unpaid, big job or little job. We need you now more than ever, all of us. So thank you for what you're doing. And the last thought I would leave is for those who aren't in the public space, who have justifiable and real reasons to be frustrated, to be angry even, and to honor those emotions, but to really invite you to take the time to reflect on that before you interact into the public space. If you're pissed off about X, take some time and journal and get clear on what you're really upset about. What would you like to see done differently? And recognize that if and when you can engage consciously in that feedback, critical feedback's fine, but consciously, as opposed to a place of ego or projection or anger, you are far likely to get those in decision-making positions to actually achieve the thing you claim to want. So the opportunity is to be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Amen. That feels, very humanized, right? Like we're all just humans, just trying to make it work.
Just humans in our office and spare bedroom saying stuff to a little box. Totally. Like, that's what we're doing here.
Right. And there's no small part to play, I think that's like the takeaway here. Politics can feel like this big hairy beast, but like you said, it's just made up of humans. And if we can learn to understand and sort of deepen our relationship to self, we have a better chance of extending that out to others and being more of a solution creator than a problem, or just, complaining about things and feeling like things are external or outside of our reach. So
that's all it is. I mean, politics is the emergent conversation of our choices around conflicting needs, preferences, or desires. That conversation will be however we choose to have it.
mm-hmm. Well, I am, on behalf of Soltara, the Maloka, and just those who are showing up every day to do the work, very grateful for your service and leadership, and really owning your journey out loud and being unapologetically, just what's the word I'm looking for? Just, in alignment with your truth and how you're showing up in that truth in your life, in politics, and your service. So thank you so much, Skippy.
Thank you.
We'll definitely drop all the links to ELC. So for those who want to connect further with Skippy or just stay involved in this movement, you will now have a place to do that. So thank you again, Skippy. And let's continue the movement.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.